Okay, so we have discussed how to calculate historical risk premiums, and there I said that we must try to use as long a historical period as we can. Now, one of the students asked me a question that for beta, I said that if we take too long a period, there can be structural changes in the firm. Why doesn't the same thing apply to historical risk premiums? Well, it does technically. Historical risk premiums or risk premiums in general do not remain static for long periods of time. However, there is a bigger issue in estimating historical risk premiums because you are using, unlike when you are estimating beta with monthly returns, you are using annual data because you want to calculate annual risk premium. Now, when you are using annual data, then even if you go 20 years in the past, you get changes. Whereas when you are using monthly data for estimating stock beta, you get 60 observations in 5 years. So statistically, when you are estimating historical risk, an average which has very high standard errors because your sample sizes are small. So it is generally considered good to go as far back in the past as we can, but it is one of the limitations of it is one of the limitations of, if you see here, it is one of the limitations of historical premium approach, that if there have been significant structural changes, let's say after global financial crisis, the risk premium that your customers are that your investors are demanding is very different from what it was prior to the global financial crisis. So if you take a period which has 10 years prior to the crisis and 10 years after the financial crisis, what you're getting is basically a weighted average of risk premium, which may not hold in future, which may be very different from what you will observe in future. So there can be structural changes, although the structural changes problem is more prominent when you're estimating stock beta, because it is more likely that a firm changes significantly over long periods like 10 or 15 years as opposed to the entire market changing. So all investors start demanding more risk premium is something which is more unlikely uh, over long periods of time, systematically more, which means for 20 years they were asking for just 4%, and from today to 20 years to the next 20 years they will be asking for 8%. So that's more unlikely than a firm having a beta which is changing over time, because firms do tend to change. They become larger, safer, more diversified. Everything affects the beta, how they move with their market. So having said that, let me move to estimation of beta. And I said that we estimate beta by doing the simple regression where we regress the returns of a security. Security is security I here. So there is a stock called I, and we take returns of that stock, which is I, and we run this regression of stock returns against market returns. These are 5-year monthly returns, so we will get 60 observations. In the spreadsheet that I am using so far, I have weekly returns, so I get much more than 60. For 5 years weekly returns, I get around 260 observations. Now when you run this regression, you will get a number of outputs. One would be your intercept, another one would be your beta coefficient, which you will use in your Kaplan models. Then there will be standard error of that beta coefficient, and then you will get something called R squared, which tells you how good your regression model is, in the sense that it tells you how much of the variation in Ri is explained by Rm. Okay, now let me pause it here. Okay, so let me show you how to calculate beta, or how to estimate beta rather, for a particular stock, and I will do it for Yes Bank's stock. I will also share this slide with you and this spreadsheet, so don't worry about that.